The distress signal cut through the static like a scream in the night, and Lieutenant Danny Cole nearly dropped his coffee when he heard it. He was alone on the Earth survey vessel Horizon, a small ship meant for scanning rocks and collecting mineral samples. Not for rescue missions or combat or anything heroic at all. The computer translated the alien message, and Danny listened with growing dread. Mayday. Imperial transport down, coordinates follow. Princess aboard, all guards dead. Please help us. Danny checked the location and found that the signal came from a barren moon called Kepler 442b, a gray and lifeless rock he had been surveying for the past week. He knew he should call for backup and wait for proper military ships to arrive, but that would take 3 weeks, and the signal was getting weaker with every passing minute. Computer, set course for the signal origin and give me maximum speed. The Horizon turned hard, and its small engines pushed as fast as they could toward the source of the distress call. When Danny arrived at the crash site, he saw destruction everywhere, and the remains of what had once been a beautiful golden ship lay scattered across a kilometer of gray dust. Fires still burned in some places, and smoke rose into the thin atmosphere like fingers reaching toward the empty sky. Danny put on his space suit and stepped out onto the moon's surface where the gravity was weak, and his boots kicked up clouds of fine powder with every step. The silence was absolute and terrifying. He walked toward the largest piece of wreckage and climbed through a torn section of hull into what had once been the main cabin. Inside he found the bodies first. They were Volanti guards with purple skin, now turned gray in death, and 4 arms that still clutched weapons which had done them no good against whatever had attacked this ship. Danny counted 12 dead guards and knew that whatever had hit this transport had been fast and merciless and very well planned. Then he heard a sound, a weak moan coming from deeper inside the wreckage, and he followed it through twisted metal and sparking wires until he found her. She lay broken among the debris with silver blood pooling beneath her slender body and her ceremonial robes torn and stained with dust and ash. The princess of the Volanti Empire looked up at Danny with enormous dark eyes, and she flinched when she saw his alien face. Human, she whispered, and the word carried both fear and desperate hope. I am here to help you, Danny said as he knelt beside her and began to assess her. Injuries, what he saw, made his stomach turn. She had broken bones in at least 3 of her 4 arms, and there was internal bleeding that he could see through the gash across her abdomen. And her spine was clearly damaged, because she could not move her legs at all, by any medical standard. She should have been dead already, and Danny did not understand how she was still breathing. The Kethrani attacked us, she managed to say through the pain. They will come back for me because I am valuable to them. Danny knew about the Kethrani from briefings and news reports, and none of what he knew was good. They were slavers and monsters who had been at war with the Volanti Empire for centuries, and a captured princess would be worth more than entire planets to them. Can you move at all? Danny asked. I cannot feel my legs, she answered with tears forming in her dark eyes. I think my back is broken, and I am dying. Danny looked at her, and then looked at the darkening sky where enemy ships might appear at any moment. His vessel had no weapons, and his medical training was basic at best, and he was one human alone against impossible odds. But she was looking at him with those enormous eyes, and he saw something there that he recognized. She was trusting him against all reason, and against everything her people believed about the primitive humans of Earth. She was putting her life in his hands. What is your name? Danny asked as he carefully slid his arms beneath her broken body. I am Alindra Voss, she said, 3rd daughter of Emperor Malthois Voss, 17th of his line, and I think I am the last of my family who still lives. Well, Alindra, I am Danny Cole, and I am going to get you out of here. That is impossible, she said weakly. You cannot save me. Maybe not, Danny admitted as he lifted her as gently as he could. But I am going to try anyway, because that is what humans do. He carried her through the wreckage and across the dusty surface of the moon toward his waiting ship, and with every step he felt her body trembling with pain. She weighed almost nothing in the low gravity, but his suffering was a heavy thing that pressed down on his heart. "Why are you doing this?" Alendra asked as they reached the horizon. "You do not know me, and my people have not been kind to yours. You needed help," Danny said simply, "and I was here. That is not a reason. It is the only reason that matters." He carried her inside and laid her on the medical bed and watched as the diagnostic systems tried to make sense of her alien body. The computer beeped unhappily and displayed a message that said, "Unknown species. Unable to provide treatment recommendations." Danny looked at the princess, lying broken before him, and he looked at the primitive medical equipment his ship carried, and he knew that saving her would require a miracle. But humans have been performing miracles since they first crawled out of the caves and learned to use fire, and he was not about to stop now. "Hold on, Alendra," he said as he began the work. "We are going to figure this out together." Outside the ship, the stars wheeled overhead, and somewhere in that vast darkness, the Kathrani were searching for their prize. The hunt had begun. The medical bay of the horizon was designed for one human with minor injuries and not for alien royalty with catastrophic trauma. Danny stood over the diagnostic console and watched numbers scroll across the screen that he did not fully understand. Alendra's silver blood was leaking from wounds he could barely see, and her hearts, she had 3 of them, were beating in patterns that seemed wrong even to his untrained eyes. "Computer, show me everything we have on Volanthi biology." The screen filled with information, but most of it was classified or incomplete because humanity had only made contact with the Empire 2 years ago, and the proud Volanthi had not shared much about themselves. Danny read what little there was and tried to form a plan. He knew that Volanthi blood carried oxygen differently than human blood, and that their organs were arranged in ways that made no sense to human doctors. He knew that they could survive injuries that would kill a human instantly, but that they could also die from things that humans would barely notice. What he did not knows how to save a dying princess on his table. "You should leave me," Alendra said weakly. "Take your ship and run before the Kathrani find you." "That is not going to happen. I am going to die anyway, and there is no reason for you to die with me." Danny turned to look at her, and his face was hard with determination. "Let me tell you something about humans," he said. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy, and we are not the smartest, and we definitely do not have the best technology. I know this already, but we are stubborn." Danny continued. "We are so stubborn that we survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions, and we kept going because we refused to give up." Alendra watched him with those large, dark eyes. "I am not giving up on you," Danny said. "So you are not allowed to give up either." He turned back to his console and began working. The next 6 hours were the hardest of Danny's life. He consulted every medical text in his database and cross-referenced Volanthi biology. With similar species he had read about, he synthesized compounds that might slow her bleeding using chemicals from his ship's limited stores. He adjusted the atmosphere in the medical bay to match what he guessed would be better for her respiratory system. He built a crude brace for her damaged spine using parts from a broken chair and strips of emergency blanket. It was ugly work and desperate work, and he had no idea if any of it would help. But when he checked her vitals after 6 hours of effort, he saw that they had stabilized. Impossible. Alendra breathed when she saw the readings. "I should be dead by now. I told you," Danny said with exhaustion heavy in his voice. "Humans are stubborn." She looked at him with new eyes, and something had changed in her expression. "My tutors taught me that humans were simple creatures," she said. "They called you violent and short-lived and barely worth noticing. Were they wrong?" "They were wrong about everything," Alendra said softly. Danny allowed himself a small smile, but he knew their troubles were far from over. The Kathrani would be searching for their prize, and his little ship could not outrun their warships. He needed a plan, and he needed one fast. "Tell me about the attack," he said. "How did they know where to find you?" Alendra's face darkened with anger and pain. "Someone in my father's court betrayed me," she said. "Someone told the Kethrani exactly where my transport would be and when. Do you know who? There are many who would see my family fall, and I have enemies I do not even know about." Danny nodded and filed that information away for later. "What happens if the Kethrani capture you?" he asked. "They will sell me to the highest bidder, or they will ransom me back to my father for a price that would bankrupt entire systems. And if your father refuses to pay," Alendra was quiet for a moment, "then they will make an example of me," she said finally. "They will broadcast my death across the galaxy to show that even the daughters of emperors are not safe from them." Danny felt cold anger building in his chest. He had not asked for this mission, and he had not wanted to be a hero, but now that he was here, he found that he could not turn away. "That is not going to happen," he said. "You keep saying things like that," Alendra said, "as if saying them makes them true. Sometimes it does." He went to the cockpit and studied the star charts, looking for somewhere to hide or someone who might help them. The nearest human outpost was 3 weeks away, and the Volanthi border was even further, but there was an asteroid field nearby. A dense maze of tumbling rocks, where even the best sensors would have trouble tracking a small ship. "Computer, set course for the asteroid field and keep our emissions as low as possible." The horizon changed direction and began its slow journey toward possible safety. Danny returned to the medical bay and found Alendra trying to sit up. "You should rest," he said. "I have rested enough, and I want to help. You have a broken spot. I also have a working brain," she said firmly, "and I know things about the Kethrani that might be useful." Danny could not argue with that logic, so he helped her into a sitting position and propped her up with pillows. "Tell me everything you know," he said, and she did. She told him about Kethrani tactics and their ships and their weaknesses. She told him about their culture of cruelty and their fear of shame and their obsession with profit. She told him things that no human had ever learned about the enemies of the Volanthi Empire, and as she talked, Danny began to form a plan. It was a desperate plan, and probably a stupid one, but it was all he had. "We might actually survive this," he said when she finished. "You believe that?" "I have to believe it," Danny said, "because the alternative is giving up, and I already told you that humans do not do that." Outside the ship, the stars continued their eternal dance, and somewhere in that vast darkness the hunters were closing in. But Danny Cole was not afraid. He was human, and humans had faced worse odds before and won. This time would be no different. On the morning of the third day, Danny knew they had run out of options. The Horizon's supplies were nearly gone, and the remaining Kethrani ships had positioned themselves perfectly to cover every possible exit from the asteroid field. He sat in the cockpit staring at the tactical display and trying to find a solution that did not exist. Alendra had recovered enough strength to sit beside him, and she studied the same display with growing despair. "There is no way out," she said quietly. "There has to be. The mathematics are simple," she replied. "Two ships cover every route, and we cannot fight, and we cannot hide forever." Danny rubbed his tired eyes and tried to think. He had not slept in almost 40 hours. And exhaustion was making his thoughts slow and fuzzy. "What if we do not try to escape?" he said slowly. "What do you mean?" "What if we go through them instead of around them?" Alendra looked at him like he had lost his mind. "That is suicide." "Maybe not." Danny pulled up the ship's specifications on his console. "How big is our escape pod?" "I do not understand." "The Horizon has an escape pod designed for emergency evacuation," he explained. "It is small and has minimal life support, but it also has a very low sensor signature. You want to abandon your ship. I want to use my ship as a weapon." Understanding dawned in Alendra's dark eyes. "You would overload your reactor." The explosion would be equivalent to a small nuclear bomb. Danny said, more than enough to destroy at least one of those ships and cripple the other. And we would be in the escape pod. Exactly. The debris field from the explosion would hide us from their sensors, and by the time they realize we survived, we would be drifting toward Volanthi space. Alindra was quiet for a long moment. That plan is insane. She said finally, do you have a better one? She did not. Danny began making preparations immediately. He programmed the reactor to overload on a timer and calculated the trajectory needed to hit the Kethrani ships. He loaded the escape pod with every supply he could fit and made sure the emergency beacon was ready to broadcast once they were clear. Alindra watched him work with a strange expression on her face. You would really die for me, she said. I am not planning to die, but you are willing to risk it. Danny stopped what he was doing and turned to look at her. When I was young, my grandmother told me a story, he said. She said that long ago humans lived in caves and were afraid of everything because the world was full of things that wanted to eat us. What changed? We learned to help each other. Danny said, we learned that one human alone was weak, but many humans together were strong. I'm not human. That does not matter, Danny said. What matters is that you needed help, and I was here. That is still not a proper reason. It is the most human reason there is. He finished his preparations and helped Alindra into the cramped escape pod. There was barely enough room for both of them, and she had to lie across his lap because of her injured spine. This is uncomfortable, she said. It is temporary. Danny sealed the pod and watched through the tiny viewport as the Horizon's engines came to life. The ship accelerated toward the edge of the asteroid field where the Kethrani waited, beginning reactor overload sequence. The computer announced, detonation in 3 minutes. The Horizon burst out of the asteroid field, and the Kethrani ships immediately moved to intercept. Danny had calculated the angle perfectly, and his ship was heading straight for the gap between the two enemy vessels. They are firing, Alindra said as she watched weapons blasts streak past the viewport. They will not destroy the ship because they still think you are aboard. What if they realize the truth? Then this will be a very short trip. The Horizon kept accelerating, and the Kethrani ships kept firing, but their shots were aimed to disable rather than destroy. They wanted the princess alive. Danny counted down the seconds in his head. 10 seconds until detonation. The Kethrani finally realized something was wrong, and one of the ships tried to turn away. 5 seconds. Danny wrapped his arms around Alindra and closed his eyes. The explosion lit up the void like a newborn star. The shockwave hit the escape pod and sent it tumbling through the debris field, while alarms screamed and systems failed one by one. When Danny finally managed to stabilize their spin, he looked out the viewport and saw nothing but wreckage. Both Kethrani ships were gone, destroyed by the explosion or crippled beyond recovery. It worked. Alindra whispered, we are alive. I told you I was not planning to die. They drifted for 18 hours. The escape pod was designed for one person, and it struggled to support two, especially when one of them was an alien with different atmospheric needs. Danny gave Alindra most of the oxygen and most of the water and most of everything else. You are killing yourself, she protested. I am sharing. That is the same thing. No, it is not. By the time the Volanthi warships arrived in response to Danny's distress signal, he was barely conscious. The rescue team found them floating among the debris with Alindra cradled in Danny's arms, and both of them more dead than alive. The Volanthi medics rushed them to the warship's hospital and spent hours putting them back together. When Danny finally woke up, he found himself in a bed made for aliens and surrounded by faces that looked at him with something he had never seen from Volanthi before. Respect. You saved her, one of the medics said. You saved the princess. Is she alive? She is recovering, and she has been asking for you. Danny closed his eyes and smiled. He had done what he set out to do. Now he just had to survive what came next. The Kithrani found them on the second day, just as Danny had feared they would. He was guiding the horizon through the outer edges of the asteroid field when the proximity alarm screamed to life and filled the cockpit with red warning lights. 3 vessels detected, the computer announced. Kithrani Hunter class, they are hailing us. Danny took a deep breath and opened the communication channel. View screen flickered and a face appeared that made his skin crawl. The Kithrani captain was insectoid with compound eyes that gleamed like whetstones and mandibles that clicked together as it spoke. It wore armor decorated with what looked like teeth and claws taken from its victims. Human vessel, the creature said in a voice that buzzed and rasped. You have something that belongs to us, and we want it back. Danny kept his voice steady, even though his heart was pounding. I do not know what you are talking about. Do not play games with me. The captain clicked its mandibles in what might have been anger. We tracked the princess to your ship, and we know she's aboard. There is no princess here. Just a geology researcher doing mineral surveys. The Kithrani made a sound that might have been laughter. You are lying, and you are doing it badly, it said. Surrender the princess now, and we will let you go free. Danny glanced back at the medical bay where Alinra lay watching the exchange with fear in her dark eyes. She gave him a small nod as if giving him permission to hand her over. He turned back to the screen. I am going to have to decline your generous offer. The captain's compound eyes seemed to narrow. You are one human in a worthless ship with no weapons, it said. We could destroy you in seconds. Maybe you could, Danny agreed. But then you would lose your prize, and I am guessing that whoever hired you would not be happy about that. Silence stretched across the void between ships. What do you want? The captain finally asked. I want you to turn around and fly away and leave us alone. More clicking laughter. And why would we do that? Because right now I am broadcasting a message on every frequency I can reach, Danny said. That message contains your coordinates and a description of your ships and a detailed account of how you attacked an Imperial transport and murdered the princess's guards. No one cares about human broadcasts. The Volanti Emperor might care, Danny replied. I pulled the encryption codes from the princess's emergency beacon, and I am using them to make sure this message reaches Imperial military channels. He watched the captain's mandibles stop clicking. By now half the Empire knows exactly where you are. Danny continued. And I am betting that Emperor Malthus is very interested in finding the people who took his daughter. It was mostly a bluff, and Danny had no idea if his message would reach anyone in time. But he kept his face calm and confident. The Kithrani captain stared at him through the view screen. For a long moment, you are either very brave or very foolish, it said. I have been told I am both. We will not leave without the princess. Then you will have to come and take her, Danny said. And while you are trying to catch me in this asteroid field, I will keep broadcasting your location to anyone who will listen. The view screen went dark as the captain cut the connection. Danny held his breath and waited for weapons fire. The ships are moving, the computer reported. They are taking positions at the edges of the asteroid field. They are going to wait us out, Danny realized. They think they can grab us before help arrives. Alindra had dragged herself to the doorway of the medical bay. Will help arrive? She asked. I honestly do not know, Danny admitted. But I bought us time, and time is something. How much time? Danny studied the tactical display and made calculations in his head. The asteroid field is dense enough to hide us for maybe 2 days if we keep moving, he said. After that, our supplies will run low, and we will have to come out. And then they will kill us. They will try. Alindra looked at him with an expression he could not read. You faced down 3 warships with nothing but words, she said. My own admirals would not have such courage. It was not courage, Danny said. It was desperation. What is the difference? He did not have an answer for that. The next 2 days were a game of cat and mouse played among tumbling rocks and ancient stone. Danny flew the horizon through gaps that should have been too small and around corners that should have been too sharp. He used every trick he knew and invented some new ones along the way. The Kathrani followed as best they could, but their ships were larger and less nimble, and they could not match his maneuvers. Twice Danny led them into traps where asteroids collided and forced them to retreat twice. He lost them completely in dense clusters of rock, only to have them find his trail again hours later. On the second day, one of the hunter ships got too close, and Danny saw his chance. He led it through a narrow passage between two massive asteroids and watched as the enemy captain tried to follow the Kathrani. Ship was faster than the horizon, but it was also bigger and less careful. It clipped an asteroid that seemed to come from nowhere, and the impact sent it spinning out of control. Danny did not stay to watch what happened next. 1 down, he said. 2 to go. That was incredible, Alindra breathed. How did you know that would happen? I did not know for certain, Danny admitted. But humans are good at reading patterns and seeing things that others miss. Your tutors taught you this. No. Danny smiled grimly. Evolution taught us this. We spent millions of years running from predators that were faster and stronger than us, and we survived by being clever. Alindra was quiet for a moment. I think my people have underestimated your species, she said finally. Most people do, Danny replied. It is one of our advantages. Outside the ship, there remain 2 Kathrani vessels, circled like sharks waiting for blood. The hunt was not over yet. The Imperial Palace of Volanti Prime was the most beautiful building Danny had ever seen. Its towers rose into the sky like crystal fingers reaching for the 3 suns that burned overhead, and its walls shimmered with colors that human eyes could barely comprehend. Danny walked through its halls, feeling small and out of place, surrounded by aliens who towered over him and watched his every move. He was still weak from his ordeal, but he had refused to stay in the hospital any longer. The Emperor had summoned him, and Danny Cole was not the kind of man who kept emperors waiting. The throne room was vast enough to hold 1,000 people, and today it was full. Lords and ladies of the Volanti Empire stood in rows along the walls, and their eyes followed Danny as he walked toward a crystal throne at the far end. Emperor Maldos Voss was ancient by any standard, with skin the color of faded purple and 4 arms that had grown thin with age. But his eyes were sharp, and they fixed on Danny with an intensity that made him want to look away. Alindra stood beside her father, and she was healed now, though Danny could see that she still favored her left side. She watched him approach with an expression he could not quite read. Danny Cole of Earth. The Emperor spoke, and his voice echoed through the chamber. Come forward. Danny walked until he stood at the base of the throne, and then he bowed because that seemed like the right thing to do. You have done my family a great service, the Emperor continued. You saved my daughter when none other could. I did what anyone would do, Your Majesty. A murmur ran through the assembled crowd, and Danny realized he might have said something wrong. The Emperor raised one hand for silence. Our advisors have studied your actions, he said. They have analyzed every decision you made from the moment you received the distress signal to the moment our ships found you. Danny waited. They tell us that what you did was impossible, the Emperor said. They say no single person could have accomplished what you accomplished with such limited resources. And yet here I am. Another murmur from the crowd. Yes, the Emperor agreed. Here you are. He stood from his throne, and the entire court knelt, including Danny. For centuries we have looked down upon your species, the Emperor said as he descended the steps toward Danny. We called you primitive and violent and barely worth noticing. I have heard this before. We were wrong. The Emperor stopped in front of Danny, and looked down at him with those ancient sharp eyes. "What you did required more than luck," he said. "It required courage and cleverness and a willingness to sacrifice everything for a stranger. She needed help. Many people need help." The emperor replied, "Few receive it and fewer still receive it from those who have nothing to gain." Danny did not know what to say. "My advisors tell me that humans act on instinct." The emperor continued, "They say you are simple creatures without higher reasoning. Your advisors seem to say a lot of things." "They do." The emperor agreed with what might have been a smile. "But on this matter I believe they are mistaken." He turned to address the assembled court. "This human faced 3 warships with no weapons and only words," he announced. "He flew through an asteroid field that our own pilots would fear to enter, and he destroyed his own vessel to protect my daughter." The court was silent, and when rescue came, he was near death because he had given everything to keep her alive. The emperor turned back to Danny. "This is not the behavior of a simple creature. I did what I had to do. You did what a human would do." Alindra spoke for the first time. "And I have learned that this is not the same thing at all." She stepped forward and stood beside her father. "Danny Cole saved my life," she said to the court, not because he hoped for reward or feared punishment, but because he believed it was the right thing to do. Many claim to believe in doing right. One of the lords said, "Few actually do it when the cost is high," which is exactly my point. Alindra replied, "This human paid a cost that most would consider too high, and he did it without hesitation." The emperor nodded slowly. "Danny Cole of Earth," he said formally, "I declare you a friend of the Volanti Empire from this day until the end of days." The court erupted in whispers. Furthermore, the emperor continued, "I declare that humanity shall no longer be considered a primitive species, and they shall be welcomed as equals and allies." Danny felt something shift in the room, like a weight being lifted from shoulders he had not known were burdened. "Your Majesty," he said, "I did not do this for reward." "I know," the emperor replied, "which is exactly why you deserve one." The formal ceremony lasted another hour, and Danny stood through all of it, even though his legs ached and his head swam with exhaustion. When it was finally over, Alindra found him in a quiet garden outside the palace. She walked without assistance now, though her steps were careful. "You are leaving tomorrow," she said. "My people need to know what happened here, and I need to be the one to tell them. I understand." They sat together on a bench beneath alien flowers that bloomed in colors Danny had no names for. "I never properly thanked you," Alindra said. "You do not need to. I know, but I want to." She turned to face him, and her dark eyes were full of something he was afraid to name. "You changed everything," she said. "Not just for me, but for your entire species." "I did not mean to. That is what makes it matter," she replied. "You did not set out to change the galaxy, and you did it anyway just by being who you are." Danny smiled despite himself. "My grandmother used to say that the smallest actions can have the largest consequences. Your grandmother was wise. She was human." Alindra laughed, and it was the first time Danny had heard her laugh since he found her broken in the wreckage. "Go home, Danny Cole," she said. "Tell your people that they have friends among the stars, and tell them that all of this happened because one man refused to leave a stranger to die. They probably will not believe me. Then they will have to learn the same lesson I did." She leaned forward and kissed him gently on the cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Danny left the next morning. His new ship, a gift from the Empire, rose through the atmosphere of Volanti Prime and climbed toward the stars. Behind him, an ancient civilization was changing its views about humanity. Ahead of him, his own people waited to hear news that would reshape their place in the galaxy. And somewhere in between, Danny Cole flew home carrying with him the simple truth that humans had always known, that the smallest person in the smallest ship can make the biggest difference. Not through strength, not through power, but through heart.